I thank you so much for your patience in receiving this. The original session number 4 went out only to one recipient on the email for some reason, which I didn't know until I'd actually finished the recording, in which the recording didn't save properly, hence why I've just repeated it to do it again. So thank you for allowing me to send this out now. Hopefully you have had time to spend time in the other videos, into the worksheets, and just get to know the body from the inside out. Get to understand what your body does when. Of course, over those first 3 weeks in the nervous system reset course, we've gained hopefully a bit of an understanding of the autonomic nervous system through the polyvagal theory, right? Understanding the 3 things that help our nervous system come back to a regulated state, right? So that is firstly understanding the polyvagal ladder, which I'm sure all of you have a better understanding of that polyvagal ladder moving forward. So of course, simply understanding those 3 main states of the autonomic nervous system, right? Our dorsal state being at the bottom of the ladder, our sympathetic or spinal sympathetic state being halfway up the ladder, and of course at the top of the ladder where we're always trying to return to come home, right? That being our ventral vagal state, right? We never live in that ventral state. We're doing our best to recognize when we get bumped out of ventral, and then noticing what our body does, also noticing what emotions we feel, and noticing what our thoughts feel like in our body, which will give us a beautiful indication of where we're sitting in our autonomic nervous system. And using the tools that I've shared with you over these 4 weeks, how we can return the body back to its ventral state. That's what's really, really important here. So firstly, really just getting to know that autonomic ladder is step number 1 to regulating our nervous system. Step number 2, right, is having the ability to witness what we're seeing without judgment, right? Stephen Porges calls this neuroception, so nervous system awareness, right? That's what's happening inside, outside, and in between. So inside, what's happening within our vehicle, all right? Things to do with our organs, our heart, our lungs, our breathing. All right, things that's going on with our digestive system, how we're healing. All of that, once again, gives us indication of what's going on in our autonomic nervous system. Are we in a state of tension or shutdown? Or is the body in an open and a ventral state? Remembering that the body's place it can heal is only in ventral, right? Neuroception also gives us the tools to recognize what's happening outside, okay? So what's happening in our environment, right? What does our body do in certain environments? What does it do when we're at work, around, a computer screen? What happens when we walk in the work door? Have we created a belief that this is not safe, or that person, is going to have that same conversation? And have we created a belief around that experience that moves our body into tension every single time we walk in the work environment, right? What happens when you walk into a shopping center? Does your body go into like a tense state and a fight state? What about when you jump in a car and you drive into traffic? Is your practiced response, right, one of anger and frustration when somebody cuts you off? And if that's what we know, then that's what we become really good at. Yeah. So tuning into what our body does in our environment, and if there's something that our body does in an environment that of course is not life-threatening, then our job is to recognize if our body is going into tension, and then retrain our neural pathways and our behavior to be different, right? That's this witnessing and choosing again, which is where we come into today's session about the brain. And also that's linked into neuroception is, with another. So it's inside, outside, and in between. In between meaning with another person. How does your body respond or react with another person? Remembering that the body is either going to open or close depending on what it feels like with that person. So we want to make sure as humans that we are doing our best to spend our time with quality human beings that help our body stay open, that support our journey, that we feel safe to share openly and authentically to that person who we are, what we do, without the fear of our bodies going into tension or walking away feeling exhausted or used or judged or whatever it might be. And that's, again, up to us to listen to what our body does around certain people and ask ourselves, well, is this certain person right for me? And does spending a lot of my time with this person make me a better person? How does that help me grow? So neuroception is, again, the second step to understanding our nervous system. And the third one, of course, is co-regulation. Co-regulation is using another human or an animal to bring us back up to safety, right? Sometimes we struggle to bring our own bodies back to a place of balance and equanimity, right? There's going to be certain people in our lives or an animal that we know that we can go to for a hug, to talk, to communicate, to cry, to express what we're feeling in a safe environment, right? There is plenty of people and spaces that can offer that to us, and our job is to recognize who that is so that when we can't regulate ourselves, we can use another person to say, hi, I'm really struggling right now and I just need to share this with you, or I need to cry, or I need to give myself permission to feel, I just need you to be there. So co-regulation is something that's so important for us humans to bring ourselves back to balance, right? So we covered that in week number 1, right, of the nervous system reset course. And over weeks number 2 and 3, we really started to dive into what your body does when. So in week number 2, we really looked into the physical, okay? We really looked into, what do your shoulders do when we move into stress, right? What animal do you turn into when you lose your keys? What does it look like in your digestive system when you are under stress, okay? There are going to be certain things physically, physiologically that are going to happen in your body. You might notice your hips start to jam up and become really tight. Your lower back might start to become really cranky if we are under a bit of stress at work consistently, right? We also have to remember that stress is good, right? None of these states of the nervous system, right, whether it be ventral, spinal sympathetic, or dorsal, are bad. It is our body trying to protect us from given threat. But we have to remember that 99% of the time, the threat is not life-threatening, okay? It is just something unfolding in our environment that we have developed a belief about that is bad, and we put ourselves into tension because of it, and the body has just learned to do that over time. Body is just practicing what it has been taught over a certain amount of years, right? So the body becomes really good at replicating that each time we have the same thing unfold in our environment. So all our job is to do is to retrain this vehicle to respond differently if the environment is something that's just a bit uncomfortable, right? If it's life-threatening, your body will do what it needs to do in a life-threatening scenario, but most of the time, it is just a bit of discomfort, meaning that we can use our tools. Remember, exhale. Your exhale gives you a pause, right? And that gives you the opportunity to choose again in that moment, right? It's also the tools such as slowing down, right? If we find ourselves becoming quite busy and sped up, then again, week number 1, we need to look at the opposite. We need to look at balancing our vehicle because our wheels are going to start to fall off. If we add busyness to busyness, we're just going to become more busy. Remember, like increases like. So if we want to find balance and equanimity and harmony with our nervous system, we have to look at what we are practicing on our 24-hour day and period, and use that information back from our bodies to go, okay, maybe I'm tipping out of balance here. What can I do to bring my vehicle back to a functioning state? Yeah. So in week number 2 and 3, we really went through all of the things that your body does in each state. So we talked about our dorsal vagal state, right? The state of shutdown, dissociation, fear, unworthiness, and hopelessness. the body actually closes, right? You'll feel the body slump inwards. The eyes will be down. You will find it really difficult to make eye contact with people when you're in a dorsal vagal state. You will be slow and it'll feel like your feet are stuck in the mud, right? You're not going to want to get up and go and move. You're going to feel like you just want to stay home and curl into a little ball and disappear like a turtle, right? In our dorsal state, we find that we feel emotions such as shame. We experience emotions such as guilt. As I said before, unworthiness, fear, worry. We can even travel sort of right down into that space of like deep judgment, in that space where we believe that we are unworthy and not deserving, right? If we're in our dorsal state, what's going to happen is our blood pressure, our heart rate, our adrenaline, and our cortisol will go down, right? It doesn't speed up. We're going to find that the muscles become really, really weak, right? And it finds that we actually are in pain a lot in a dorsal state. Yeah, we feel constantly if somebody touches us that it hurts, right? Somebody presses onto our skin, it hurts. Because what's happening here is the body is living in a survival state. We can experience things in our dorsal state such as fibromyalgia, severe gut disorders, right? Endometriosis, right? Anything that is stemming from constant inflammation for the body spending time in survival states, right? So we have to remember that if our bodies are not having the opportunity to return back to its healing state, ventral, then we are practicing a journey of inflammation. The longer we stay in an unregulated state in our nervous system, the inflammation simply will grow. So our job is to recognize these little things that show up for us, right, in the physical body, inside and out, and to use that as information that we might have shifted into an unregulated state so we can bring ourselves back using the tools to ventral so we can heal, right? If we find ourselves living in a spinal sympathetic state, all right, we're going to find that the body will be constantly in tension, okay? Very opposite to the dorsal state, which looks like this. If we're in our spinal sympathetic state, our fight-flight state, you are going to be hyper-vigilant. You are going to be looking for things in your day, right, that are out to hurt you. You're going to be looking for people to hurt you. You're going to see everything that unfolds in your environment as an attack, right? You're going to feel judged. You're going to feel criticism. You're going to feel worry, doubt, fear, blame, right? We're going to feel angry and frustrated, and you might feel like a bit of a volcano ready to go off at any moment. Physically, your shoulders are actually going to be up around your ears. Your upper traps are going to be on. Your neck's going to become really tight from all the tension. You're going to suffer from headaches, migraines, have things go on with your eyes, your nose, your ears, your mouth. It's all linked into the autonomic nervous system, all those cranial nerves here. You're going to find that there's going to be a lot of tension around your belly and your gut's not going to work properly. We're not going to digest our food. We're going to have struggled to go to the bathroom, constipation or diarrhea. You're going to find that your breath is going to be up here in your chest and you're going to be breathing more than 20 beats per minute, right? We should be breathing about 10, not even. You're going to find that you are a little bit rigid in the way that you move. You're going to be dropping things. You're going to lack concentration. You're going to forget things. Like you're going to lose your keys constantly, right? Your movements will be quite stiff. And you might trip and fall a bit in this state, right? You'll also find that your emotions in this state will be very much around the critical thinking. You'll fall into perfectionism. As I said before, you'll feel the need to be right. So the practice of righteousness is quite high in a spinal sympathetic state. We find that we are constantly blaming others for things unfolding in our environment, right? And as I said, we're, might experience things such as jealousy or hatred or rage, anger, and frustration in this state, yeah? Right? The animal that you might become in this state might look something like a meerkat. It might look something like a tiger. It might look something like a seagull, like really scattered and all over the shop, right? And of course, the last state that we explored, what happens inside and out, is our ventral state, where we return to, where we come home to, okay? And that's where everything works, right? It's like the landscape of our body is in a relaxed state, meaning that when we eat food, we receive the nutrients that the food has to offer us, right? Our digestive system works fully and wholly here, meaning that when we eat our food, we receive the nutrients, and what we don't need is perfectly excreted out of us. Our heart, lungs, our liver, our organs are in a pure functioning state here, and they are healing us. Our liver, being the master organ, does its job, right? It clears out armor or toxicity in the body to help us stay healthy and well. Now, the liver can only do this in a ventral state. If we are in a spinal sympathetic here or a dorsal state, the message to the body or to the nervous system is that there is a threat. There's no need for the liver to heal you here because the body is in an emergency state. Whether it be spinal sympathetic, fight, flight, or dorsal vagal shutdown, freeze or fawn. There's no need for the body, the internal body, everything that looks after the vehicle to operate the way that it should, because it is purely in survival mode, right? So when we're in ventral, our bodies are open, our shoulders are back, our upper trapezius are down and they're away from the ears, right? You'll find that the heart's open here, right? You'll find when you're talking to somebody, you're going to make eye contact. You're going to find that your body stays open in that space. You're going to find that the lower back pain subsides, the hip pain subsides. You're going to feel loose and supple and energetic in your body rather than rigid, stuck and slow. You're going to find that you lose weight easily here, right? As opposed to being in an emergency state where your body will actually hold on to body fat because it believes it's under threat, You'll find that your breath is in your belly, and when you're breathing, your chest and your shoulders are not rising. It's just a pure belly breath, which is how we should be breathing 24/7. You'll find that you'll breathe with your lips sealed and through your nose. You'll find that in your experience and in your environment, people will be kind, people will be compassionate, right? You'll find that you're able to manifest the things that you desire freely, without the energy of doubt or worry coming into that and blocking that manifestation. You'll find that you're able to see more, appreciation for things, to step outside and appreciate the day, to appreciate humans, to appreciate where you're at without the need for more. That can only happen when you land into a ventral state, right? We can only experience the emotions of love, joy, gratitude, happiness, acceptance, kindness, and compassion when we are in a ventral state. And that's why it's really, really important to understand that when we recognize our autonomic nervous system has tipped or shift gears into its spinal sympathetic state or down into dorsal, that we need to do whatever we need to do, right, to return our nervous system back to a point of safety. Now that brings me to session number 4, where we're just going to talk on a little bit about our emotions and the emotional scale, and of course onto the triune brain, which of course was some beautiful teachings by Dr. Dan Siegel in his book Mind Sight, right? But I firstly want to speak onto the emotional scale, which I also share in my book What's Your Language. And you can Google the emotional scale, or it's in your worksheets, to have a look at the 24 main emotions that we experience on any given day, and they all cover with that what's called a vibrational match, right? So take a moment to think about the emotion of fear and what it feels like when we're gripped with fear, right? You're going to notice that your body is actually going to be in a really closed position. Your shoulders are going to be probably rolling inwards, right? We're going to feel like we kind of want to disappear. We feel like we want to run away. Your breathing might have slowed completely down into that dorsal state, right? Or you might have even shifted into an anxious state with the fear, right? Meaning that you're hovering in that spinal sympathetic state there, right? Right. What you'll also notice is that the thoughts that you're having when you're experiencing the emotion of fear, right, are going to be ones of disbelief, right? They're going to be backed with what if this is going to happen, or what do I do when this happens? And we're basically moving ourselves into a scenario that hasn't unfolded yet. So fear is worry about the future and about something that hasn't unfolded yet, meaning that we are putting our bodies into a situation that has not unfolded, but our body is responding like that is true. So when we feel the emotion of fear, right, that's going to carry a very low vibrational energy with it. So it's like it's on radio station 99.1, right? And that's going to continue to draw to us experiences and people, right, and environments that match that radio frequency of 99.1, right? Again, we're going to experience those things in environment where we might experience lack, right? Financially, we might be lacking in money, and that continues to happen because we're staying on that radio frequency. We're going to experience in our relationships people that treat us like shit, right? We're going to experience things unfolding in our relationships where we feel like we are being used, because that's the frequency we're on. So of course the same experiences come to us, right? What we are worrying about, if we are giving attention to that worry, is likely going to manifest into something real, because we continue to give that power. That is the law of attraction, and that's exactly what happens. So we have to understand that if we are spending time on our emotional set point of fear, radio station 99.1, then if we give that attention, our thoughts, 24 hours a day, we have to expect that the same scenarios continue to come back to us. However, if we are operating on radio station 107.7, on a radio station of appreciation, where we simply appreciate where we're at, we appreciate the body we're in without the need for more. We appreciate the things that unfold into our life, a random amount dropping into our bank account. We appreciate it. You appreciate the people that you get to spend time with, the loved ones that come into your life, the cuddles, the joy, the family time, the time with friends, the things that unfold in your environment, getting out and going for a swim or a walk in nature, and you spend time in that appreciation of like, wow, this is good. I get to do this. If you appreciate your body when you move rather than judge it, right? If you appreciate your body and go, I can do this, like, thank you, body, for allowing me to do this, rather than moving into the opposite, going, oh, I'm moving because I ate too much last night or I drank too much last night. That's criticism. That's going to close your body. That's a negative match for that energy, right? You are only going to create more of the same, right? So your body is going to be in tension when you're moving. Right? If you've got a body and you're moving it, we need to appreciate that rather than look for a different result. Why not appreciate the skin we're in now without the need for more, right? And that will keep your body open. And therefore you are hovering on that radio station of 107.7, and the people that come into your life, right? The environment, what unfolds in your environment, right? And everything that you see, right, you'll be able to have appreciation for, because that's the radio frequency you're sitting on. That's your emotional set point, meaning that more of the same is going to come back to you if your thoughts are spending a hell of a lot of time in that appreciation, joy, gratitude, and acceptance. Yeah? So it's so important to use our emotional scale. Again, it can be found anywhere online or in my book, What's Your Language, to recognize that the emotions we spend time in, okay, so whether it be ones of fear or unworthiness or shame, or whether it be appreciation, joy, acceptance, and gratitude, and if we give our ammo to that, as in our thoughts 24/7, either of that is going to create more of the same. Yeah, our job is to use that emotional guidance system to recognize what frequency we're on, what radio station we're on, and reach for a better feeling thought to regulate our nervous system back up the ladder, which also is the polyvagal theory, right? If you look at those two ladders, back to a safe space, back to ventral. So, for example, if we are feeling shame, right? If we are feeling shame, shame is under anger and frustration. If you look at the emotional scale, shame is right down the bottom, okay? It's one of the last or the lowest vibrations we can feel. Right? And just to clarify, the difference between shame and guilt is shame is I am a bad person, Whereas guilt is, I have done a bad thing. It's very different. Shame lands us into a really dark place of unworthiness, right? And we feel discouragement and we can feel hopelessness here, right? And I'm going to use the example of shame because I know every single one of us has gone through the emotions of shame, especially myself. I spent 20 years in that emotion of shame. So my experience, right, of course, of what I brought back in matched that vibrational radio station of shame until I could recognize what I was giving my attention to and choose a better feeling thought to give my power to, right? So if we find that we are stuck in the emotion of shame, right, and we are on a radio frequency of 92.1 here, right, it's quite low, right? We have to actually become aware that we're in shame. So your body, through the polyvagal theory and the nervous system, is going to tell you that you have shifted very much into a dorsal shape. Shame will close you. It will move you into shutdown. Your breathing will become like quite shallow. Your movements will be slow. Heart rate will go down. Shoulders will roll in. You won't want to get out of bed and you won't want to talk to anyone. And if you do talk to anyone, you're going to find that you are going to think you are unworthy and you're going to blame yourself for how that conversation unfolds. So when we notice, become aware of practicing the emotion of shame, as in giving our attention to that vibrational channel, we can then consciously move up the emotional scale to a better feeling emotion. So moving up the emotional scale and allowing ourselves to become angry is a great thing. Anger is higher than shame. Anger will allow you to get into your spinal sympathetic system and move. So that gives us the opportunity to go and let our anger out safely. Do not take our anger out on anyone else, right? We have been taught that anger is a bad emotion, but when you look at the emotional scale, it is much better than shame or discouragement or dissociation or hopelessness, right? We want to move through anger so that we can get it up and out of our system. And that's the important thing about the polyvagal theory. We need to understand that if we're at the bottom of the ladder in shutdown, the only way is up. And we have to move through those emotions to get that out, to allow ourselves to return back to ventral, right? In my experience, and when I was unwell, I didn't have the opportunity to move through those emotions. So a lot of the time we may take a tablet, or we may numb with alcohol, or we will scroll on our phones, and we miss the experience of getting our bodies into that activated state to let out the energy of shame, to have a cry, to move, right? To punch something, not a person, but punch something, to get angry with a bag, punch your pillow, scream into your pillow, have a big cry, go for a run, get in the ocean. You need to do some movement to move out those lower vibrational energies, to move up the scale. And when you allow yourself to feel anger and frustration, get angry, process the emotion, sit with it. An emotion only lasts 60 to 90 seconds. It's the story we attach to it that becomes our reality. It's just a practice belief. Any thought that we give attention to for more than 16 seconds starts to become what we call a belief. So we have to remember that the opposite is also true. So to actually do that, we need to feel that anger, feel that frustration, and that might move us then into boredom, right? Boredom is higher than anger, right? If you look onto that emotional scale. And it's from that place of boredom that a lot of the time, once again, we're going to pick up our phone. We're going to look for a distraction. We're going to clean the house. We've got to go do this. We've got to go do that. We can't sit still because it's like, oh, like this is uncomfortable. But it's within that boredom and stillness that we can then climb up the ladder further to acceptance. Just go, you know what? It's actually okay. You know, things unfolded the way they did. Everything plays a role. To blame ourselves or to hold ourselves in shame is a choice. I know because I've been there. We don't have to put ourselves through that, and we can actually just accept things for what they are. Right? To move into acceptance is ventral. If you look at the emotional scale and compare that with the polyvagal ladder, you'll notice that it's at the top of the scale. When we can just accept things as they are, we might not like what it is, but we can accept it for what it is. Your body will relax into that moment. The shoulders will open, the heart will open, your breathing will return back to here, your digestive system will work, and you will then have access to what's called your prefrontal cortex. And this is what we're going to talk about now. So it is so important to recognize, not just through the emotional guidance system, but also your body when we have shifted and been bumped, right? Shifted gears into our spinal sympathetic or down into dorsal, so that we, of course, can move ourselves back to a better feeling thought, right? And practice that instead, right? Remember, you always have the opportunity to choose. No matter what is going on in our environment, it's happening anyway. So if we are struggling with finances, it's happening anyway, right? If we're experiencing busyness and stress at work, it's happening anyway. If the kids are not doing what we want them to do and they're mucking up and they're playing around and they're not listening, it's happening anyway. We've always got a choice as to how we see it. Right? Our job is to meet the environment with as less resistance as possible. If we can change the scenario, right? If we can do something about our work, if our work is stressing us out and it's making you go into tension every single day, then you have a choice to continue that work or to not continue that work, right? If you choose to continue the work, that's great, but you need to drop your resistance to it, right? If we continue to be in a relationship that continues to cause tension, that's great. Continue it, but drop your resistance to it. And you do the work, right? There's always two ways to look at resistance. One is to drop our resistance to it, and the other is to change it. And that's always the way with any scenario moving forward. The moment we resist something, your body will go into tension, meaning that your emotions are going to drop down, and your vibrational match to that emotion is going to sit on a lower frequency. If we are on an emotional set point of a lower frequency vibration, then that means that more of that lower frequency vibration in our experiences, people, work, environments, and things are going to absolutely match where we are sitting. So when we combine the brain now into these teachings, and this is the final part of this work, it makes sense to us when we can recognize why we're choosing to do the things that we do, why we keep repeating patterns, why we keep going back into that old shame story, why we are continuing to be reactive with our partners, why we continue to talk to ourselves in the mirror in a judgmental or critical state. This is where we really gain an understanding of what neural pathways we have created that is now being experienced as our reality. So if you haven't yet already, Dan Siegel writes an amazing book called Mindsight, and I highly recommend, after reading the book Anchored, that you dive into a little bit of Dan Siegel's work. It's a really phenomenal book on the brain, neuroplasticity, and understanding the triune brain. In your worksheets, you're going to notice that you have an image there of a hand model of the brain. And I'll do that with you guys now, and you can do that too as you're watching this back. We want to really think of our brain as looking like this, right? So I've just created a fist and I've placed my thumb on the inside and wrapped my fingers around the outside. This is the front of our brain. This is the back of our brain, and this is our brain stem, okay? So when we're talking about the triune brain, he's describes this so simply, and it's a really quick explanation that hopefully ties into everything else that we've been speaking about, to be one of those potential light bulb moments where you're like, I get it. I get why my belief around myself or someone has become so strong, right? And why I haven't been able to change it. And hopefully this clicks for you like it did for me. So when we're talking on the triune brain, I'm just going to break this down a little bit here. And once again, you've got this in your notes. So we're going to explore 4 parts of the brain here, starting firstly with our brainstem. So if you look at the back here into our head, so we want to think about the brainstem, of course, as the part of our body that moves into our skull, okay? This is known also as our reptilian brain, and this was the first part of our brains that started to develop, okay, many years ago. When we look at the reptilian brain, all right, this also houses, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, I do definitely when we are moving into coaching and other courses, but our reptilian brain houses our cranial nerves. Now, we have about 12 cranial nerves in and within this region, but 5 of them in particular are linked into the autonomic nervous system, right? And I want to be quite specific in helping you understand that those 5 cranial nerves are to do with the things that we see, the things that we smell, the things that we hear, right? The things that we can taste, right? It's all to do with our senses. And also to do with our accessory nerve, which is cranial nerve 11, okay? This is our upper trapezius here, right? These guys, the armor, and also our sternocleidomastoid muscle, which is our neck, okay? This is cranial nerve 11, and once again, it's linked into our autonomic nervous system. So the moment that we perceive a threat, as in we've just been cut off in traffic or you've just received an email from your boss or lost your keys, then this is going to happen. You are going to activate cranial nerve 11, your accessory nerve, and your body will move into a spinal sympathetic state, right? The other cranial nerve I wanted to mention, which you would have probably heard of this before, is your vagus nerve, which is cranial nerve 10. Now, a vagus nerve, it starts, of course, in the brainstem, part of our reptilian brain, and it travels down the back. It moves across the front of the body here, and it travels down the front, and it goes through all of our organs, and it they call it the wandering nerve, right? And it lands all the way down into our gut, okay? So this particular nerve, our vagus nerve, right, when we're talking about regulating our nervous system and we're talking about the tools such as breathing, this is the nerve that communicates from your body first. Remember, it's 80% from your body to your brain, 20% back down from your brain to your body. It is your body first that notices things unfolding in your environment. So our vagus nerve is what communicates to our brain, oh my God, there is a threat. We now need to move into spinal sympathetic, fight, flight, or down into fear, into our shutdown state or fawn, freeze or fawn state, right? It's all through that nerve. Right, so when we notice discomfort in our environment, right, again, this is the nerve that helps us regulate our nervous system. So when I belly breathe and nasal breathe, what I'm doing here, with that extended exhale, if I'm inhaling for the count of 4, not rising, not bringing up my traps, not breathing into the chest, and if I'm exhaling for 6, I'm communicating to my body that my environment is safe, right? An extended exhale will very easily communicate to your body that whatever it is unfolding in your environment is uncomfortable, but it's not a threat. If your body is relaxed, right, into that moment and you're exhaling, quite clearly, there's no need to run from the so-called tiger, okay? So if I exhale, right, you'll notice that the body completely relaxes, right? So I'll do a couple of breaths here. You'll see there's a real softness here as I breathe out. And it's within that exhalation that your body receives a message that I am safe, right? So our vagus nerve is a really important one to understand. It is linked into our reptilian brain, and it is absolutely the communication of that body to brain to go, what is unfolding in my environment? Is it safe or unsafe? And what do I need to do based on that moment that unfolds, right? So as I mentioned before, we have 2 choices with everything. So if something is unfolded in my environment, for example, my ex-partner drove a yellow car, okay, and that relationship created a bit of trauma and memories that were not so great. It was a not so happy experience. And each time, if I haven't released that relationship, or if I still hold any guilt or blame or shame for having that relationship, then what's going to happen that each time I see a yellow car that reminds me of my ex-boyfriend's relationship, I am going to go straight back to that experience, and my body is going to move into tension or shut down because I'm still holding on to an emotion that is linked to that experience, right? To change that experience in our bodies, the moment we see a yellow car, I invite you to exhale. Be like, and in that moment, you have the opportunity to pause, and you have the opportunity to choose again and actually go, you know what? It's actually okay, right? Right now, a year later, 2 years later, 10 years later, it's okay. It's okay. Just by telling your body it's okay, you start to change those neural pathways that create acceptance around what was rather than judgment, and your body then responds differently each time you see that yellow car. This is what we're talking about here, right? So our vagus nerve is absolutely everything linked into regulating your nervous system, right? And it's linked into that reptilian brain. Now, our reptilian brain is responsible for survival, okay? So when we think about our reptilian brain, think about the basics that regulate our nervous system, okay? The basics that we need as humans to operate in the world we're in today: sleep, sex, digestion, good quality food, movement, breath, and shelter. These are the things that if we are lacking in any of that, then unfortunately our autonomic nervous systems are going to be in a hypervigilant state of stress, or cooked and overwhelmed and down to shut down, right? So quite simply, if we look after the basics, right, of this reptilian brain, we move our bodies every day, right? You take time for rest and good quality sleep. Our sleep is everything, okay? Everything. If you are not sleeping, you are living in a state of spinal sympathetic. That's exactly the way it is. And if you're living in a state of spinal sympathetic, you are on the road to inflammation, sickness, and dis-ease, right? Our bodies need sleep to heal, and we need to get about 7 to 8 hours a night. That is absolutely a no-brainer, and is exactly what we need for a regulated nervous system. Good quality food, scrap the packaged food. Anything that has more than 3 ingredients in it, or it has numbers or chemicals that you do not know what it is, do not put it in your body. Quite simply, do not put it in your body. Ditch the alcohol. Alcohol numbs the body. 1 glass of wine, 2 glasses of wine, we start to move into a bit more numbed state. And then we continue to just practice the numbing, right? Be okay if you are going to have a glass of wine every now and then. Have it with presence. Have a glass of red wine and enjoy it, but don't drink the whole bottle, right? Wine is packed with sugar, right? And once again, every time we pack sugar into our bodies late at night, unfortunately, our body is going to struggle to burn body fat, and then the cycle continues, right? Hang around with people that support what you do, okay? Relationships, good quality relationships, right? Make sure your home environment is safe and nurturing, and it like lights you up, okay? Make sure that you are tuning into your breathing. As I said, it's not breath work. It's breathing is what you do every single day. So make sure that your breathing is constantly nasal breathing, belly breathing. There is no need to breathe up here unless there is a tiger. Okay, so look after the basics and you will keep your nervous system regulated. Okay, this is all part of the reptilian brain. Yeah, all right. And when you look at the hand model of the brain, this is right here. Okay, this is our brain stem. This is all this area here, located here, where of course is the access to our cranial nerves. Okay, moving inwards. Okay, this part in here is our limbic region of the brain. Okay, so if we are looking at the brain here, it sits right inside. Okay, so we've got the cortex here and the prefrontal cortex, and our limbic region is in the center. This houses the hypothalamus, the hippocampus. It also houses what's called the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is like our fire alarm, okay? So when we think of the amygdala, each time that we move into a stress state, the body is recognizing that, and the body gets used to living in stress. We get used to living in chronic stress because that's what we've practiced, okay? Each time that we move into chronic stress, the amygdala lights up like a fire alarm, and we then are hypervigilant and we are expecting shit to happen, okay? if we get good at chronic stress, then your amygdala is constantly going to be lighting up, and we're going to feel exhausted, tired, can't concentrate, can't think, and we are going to really struggle being present, because your thoughts will always be going forward into worry, doubt, or fear, or backward into shame, blame, or guilt. So it's so important to understand that this limbic region of our brain, our emotional brain, our mammalian brain, right, the second part of our brain to develop, is all about our emotions. It's all about what we have believed to be right or wrong, right? There's an old quote out there that says, show me the child, until he's 2 or 7, and between the ages of 2 and 7, and I'll show you the man. Meaning that we develop our program between the ages of 2 and 7. So everything we perceive and believe to be true, as in practice thoughts, that's all they are, right, becomes our program from the age of 7 and up. So if we believed as a child, like my story, that I'm not enough, then if I don't become aware of those thoughts and that practiced belief, that becomes my program that I've stored in this limbic emotional brain for the rest of my life, until I become aware of that story and to be able to change it. Yeah, and that's what we're going to talk about. So it's a really interesting part of our brain. It houses all our memories. Again, it's our part of the brain that we have learned what is right, what is wrong for us. Again, not one of us knows enough to be right. So remember that your things that are right for you will be very different to another person's. And that is always changing, right? So it's so important to understand that what we perceive to be true, right, is only true due to our practice of thoughts, right? With enough focused attention on a thought, we then create a belief, and that becomes our truth. So that means that our truth, what we believe to be true about ourselves, can always change. So for my example, of course, spending nearly 20 to 30 years in an eating disorder, my emotional set point was shame. I believed I wasn't worthy, I wasn't enough, and that everything that unfolded was my fault, right? That was up to me to change my emotional set point. In other words, to change my neural pathways to create a different synaptic connection and a cluster of neurons that believed I was worthy and enough, okay? And that's what we're kind of talking about here. So when we're talking about this limbic, emotional, mammalian brain, we have to understand that when things unfold in our environment, like the yellow car, right? If we have a certain belief about that yellow car, it's going to light up that part in our brain that reminds us of feeling blame for being in that relationship. And that's only because that limbic area has remembered that part. Unless we change the story, which is what we're about to talk about, then each time you see that yellow car, that part of your brain is going to light up and you're going to have the same experience again and again, yeah? When we talk about the next part of the brain, I'm just going to quickly touch on the cortex, okay? So the top of the brain here, right? When we're looking at the cortex, this is, of course, our thinking brain. This is where we are, again, we have thought. We are able to imagine, right? We create here. Moving down to our prefrontal cortex. Again, this is our area of witnessing, seeing, intuition, guidance. So this is called our human brain, or our rational brain. And this is the last part of the brain to develop, right? And when we look at this part of the brain, this is everything to do with being present. This is everything to do with a regulated nervous system, because this is the part of the brain that allows us to see and witness, oh, I am choosing a thought of I'm not enough, or it's my fault, or everyone always treats me this way, or even if I do this, it's going to end up shit. Right? We can witness that thought with this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. Animals can't do that. They don't go for a run on the beach and think, oh, I could have sprinted faster that time. Or they don't, like do a wee in the house like my little puppy, and she doesn't fall into shame for the rest of the day because she's weed in the house. We do. We spend time in the thoughts that don't serve us, right? This is what we can do in this part of the brain. It can serve us, but it can also not serve us, okay? It is our thinking brain. right? But it gives us that ability to witness what we are thinking. And if it's not something that is a vibrational match to what we want, okay? So if we are in those thoughts of not feeling enough or not feeling worthy or blaming ourselves or judging ourselves or criticizing ourselves, then it's our job to shift to a better feeling thought. This is the abilities of the prefrontal cortex, right? So to tie this all into your nervous system, Dan Siegel shares a really great story in his book Mindsight about his family and his experience with an unregulated nervous system. And he says something along the lines of this. He says, you know, I was writing my next book and I have had quite a few sleepless nights. I've been eating shitty food. I haven't moved my body. I haven't been doing things that light me up. I have been bickering with my wife, and I'm on an afternoon out with my 2 kids, and we go to a pancake parlor in the States. And he says it's a hot day, it's sweaty and it's sticky and it's packed. And the 2 kids go up to the counter, and Dan asks the kids what they want, and the little boy's like, I want this, this, and this, and this, and the little girl's like, nah, I'm not hungry. Right? And they get their food and they go to sit down at a table. And by this point, again, with the effects of the environment, the sweat, the heat, people everywhere, the kids then start bickering. And what he's noticing, his body is in tension. He's feeling like, you know, all of this heat start to rise to the surface. He's feeling frustrated. He's wondering when he can get back home to get back to his book. He's wondering about all the 100 emails in his inbox. He's also thinking about something that he did 2 hours ago and going, oh, you know, I should have done that different. So he's not even there with his kids, right? And the kids start playing a game of sibling chess, right? So the little girl's like, you know what, actually I am hungry. Can I please have some of yours? And he's like, no way, you didn't order any pancake. And he throws a bit at her. And the sibling chess continues, as you can imagine if you've got kids, right? And Dan's noticing, or more so not noticing, unconsciously recognizing that he is feeling angry. He's feeling frustrated at the kids. He's feeling himself boil up like a bit of a volcano here. And of course, on the next bit of pancake that gets thrown at the boy, he then loses his shit. He flips his lid and he yells at the kids. He sends one of them outside. One of them's now crying. He feels shame and guilt in the restaurant for being a bad parent. And then everything's a bit of a mess following that for a couple of hours. Now, upon recognition of that, he speaks in his book, he's like, you know, I then had to recognize why, right, I reacted instead of responded to that scenario, right? And he explains it super simply like this, and this is what we'll end on in this segment. Again, if we look at our brains in this hand model of the brain, it's a really nice way to see what happens when we flip our lid and where we lose consciousness or awareness to the situation unfolding in front of us. He said that with my brain, right, what happened was because I hadn't slept, because I wasn't eating well, because I hadn't moved my body, all of those concepts that keep us regulated, again, the reptilian part of our brain, were not being looked after. This means that my emotional brain was lighting up. So all of these experiences that were happening, he said it was reminding me of something that unfolded when I was a kid, sibling chess, and it made me feel angry and frustrated, right? So what happened was because this area wasn't looked after, he then loses connection to the prefrontal cortex, right? And what he says here is that I flip my lid, because the focus is now on experience that have happened, right? His kids might have argued before and he's like, oh, here we go again. Straight away lighting up this area of the hypothalamus and the hippocampus. His amygdala has been, lit up, emergency state on. So unfortunately, he's flipped his lid. He doesn't have access to his prefrontal cortex, so the ability to see and witness the scenario and choose, again, a better feeling emotion here, a better feeling thought. The ability to respond, not react, right? And he has simply operated out of his pre-programmed mind, okay? Creating a similar scenario that might have unfolded a week ago, a year ago, 10 months ago, 3 years ago, right? Because he has lost that access to his prefrontal cortex. So the moral of the story, if we look after the basics of this reptilian brain, okay, as I mentioned before, sleep, sex, digestion, movement, breath, our shelter and our relationships, right? We are going to maintain the ability to have access to our intuition, to our thought, to our vision, to be able to see, to be present with scenarios unfolding in front of us. And if we notice our body wanting to shift into a pre-programmed belief or a pre-programmed behavior, which it will do, right? We can exhale, witness what we're feeling, ask ourselves, does this require me to shift into my hyena animal? Does this require me to shift into my meerkat? Or can I actually choose again in this scenario? Can I choose to respond, not react, so that I then start to fire and wire new neural pathways that create a different response in that environment, all right? So for example, going back to the yellow car, okay? So when I become aware of that, if I see that yellow car and I'm in a regulated state, right? Because of the pre-programmed behavior that I had practiced for however many years, say 10 years, each time I see the yellow car, the body and the brain's going to go back to what it knows when it sees the yellow car, unless we become present to become aware to change it. So if I'm in a regulated state and I see that yellow car, then my body's going to want to go into tension. My job is to use my exhalation, again, triggering the vagus nerve, to actually go, okay, what do I need to tell me? What's a better feeling thought that I can have about this yellow car? You know, and something along the lines of, it's now okay, can be so helpful. To actually go, you know what? I don't need to put my armor on just because I've seen that yellow car, right? Whatever happened 10 years ago is not happening now in this moment. So I'm going to train my body to do something differently when I see that yellow car. And that is what's super, super important to understand, that when we are regulated using all of these tools that I've shared with you, you then have the ability to see. You don't lose your prefrontal cortex. You don't flip your lid, and you don't go back to those pre-programmed behaviors. And you then have a moment, it's a really short moment, to not give ammo to those neural pathways of judgment, shame, criticism, or guilt. And you can actually choose to have compassion or acceptance or allowing or kindness instead for that situation. And that's where we start to dissipate those neural pathways or clusters, right? Clusters of synaptic connections. You don't give them as much energy anymore. And each time you see the yellow car, you give power to that new thought. You give power to that better feeling thought that then starts to become a cluster of neurons, right? And that's when we start to change those neural pathways to create a different behavior. I've talked a lot. I hope that information again, has put all of those 4 videos together for you, and that we can actually have some sort of awareness and knowledge about why we do the things that we do, and not judge that, but actually go, you know what, maybe I've been in an unregulated state for a while, and that's why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. So that's why it's so, so important to do what we can do to bring our vehicles back to balance as quickly as possible, so that we can use our prefrontal cortex when these experiences pop in our environment, and they will, to choose again and again and again, right? Once again, just to recap, notice what radio frequency you are practicing the most, your emotional set point, okay? Is it an emotion that is sitting around anger or frustration all the time, right? And if that's the case, we want to do our best to change that set point up to just acceptance. Right? Is it an emotional set point that hovers around shame or guilt, like what mine was? You know, fear of lack of money. You know, that was a big one for me, right? And how do I shift that emotional set point to one to trust, right, that everything is unfolding perfectly, okay? So we're using that emotional scale, right, to shift our vibrational frequency, our radio station, if we notice we're hovering around certain emotions. Right? And secondly, do what you can do to keep these parts of the reptilian brain stimulated, right? Look after the basics. so that we then have that opportunity to choose a better feeling thought to create a different neural pathway that will return our nervous systems back to a ventral vagal state. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your patience. I hope you got a lot out of that. I will be sending up some follow-up videos. I also do one-on-one coaching on this stuff where I dive a little bit deeper in what it actually looks like for you. So please don't be afraid to get in touch if you would like some information onto that as well. I do have another course coming up in a month or two, really diving into how we can shift our thoughts. So if any of that resonated, just keep an eye out for the next online course, which is a really beautiful complement to this one, on if we notice ourselves giving our power, again, to a frequency that doesn't really work so well for us. What do we do about changing that? So that will be starting in about 1 or 2 months. Once again, I hope you got a lot out of this, and any questions, please feel free to get in touch. Once again, thank you.